Hey everyone, this is Laurie Meyer from stampedgreetings.com, and I am super excited to share a fun card with you today. I'm calling it a triple die cut with a twist, and let me explain why you're staring at three cards right now. The first one, the one on the top, is what I know as triple stamping, and this is one that I did a while ago. It is definitely very fun. It's pretty simple, and it's probably something that many of you have done before. And I wanted to take this idea and actually twist it up, and I did. And let me show you what I'm talking about. So these two cards are examples of the triple die cut with a twist. And the card that I'm going to replicate is the one on the left, but they're both done in the exact same way. The only real difference is that on the card on the left, I used designer series paper as the focal point. So this one is super quick in terms of not having to create a background. On this card, the one on the right, I did a lot of stamping with a beautiful set that features sunflowers. And then I went back in and did a lot of coloring with the watercolor pencils to design my own background. And you may be able to see that I stamped this on some designer series paper to start. And I'm going to do another project in the next few days that will use a background that I'll create. So that'll be fun to share with you as well. But the thing that I wanted to point out is you're going to see that there are die cuts that are in here. There are die cuts over here as well. This is actually a die cut underneath the embossed greeting. And this is only one piece of paper, even though it looks like the die cuts are made out of several pieces. But you'll notice that the design is continuous. You can see that leaf going from one die cut into the other. So that's the trick, and that's what I'm going to show you. I'm going to get the example that I'm not going to focus on out of the way. And this is the one that I will be working on. It is using some elements that will be retiring. It's just a really fun, I think, and bright birthday card. Let's celebrate you on the outside, and then on the inside, I have happy birthday. But let me get right to it. I want to show you how I created this. We are going to start with the pieces of paper that you will need to do this card. The card base is a piece of basic white. It is cut to 8.5 by 5.5, and then on the 8.5-inch side scored at 4.25. So it's a standard A2 card. I will have all of these dimensions in the notes when I post this, and you can go back and take a look. So you'll have all the measurements, not to worry. For the frame that is around the designer series paper, and again you can see that right around the edge, this is a piece of pumpkin pie cardstock. I love this color. It's just so bright. And it is cut to 4.125 by 5.375, just a little bit smaller than our card base. And we'll get back to that in just a minute. But the star of the show is a piece of designer series paper and some dies. And I have taken the liberty to get some of this ready. I didn't think you would really find watching me die cut to be incredibly exciting. So I've done some prep beforehand, but I'm going to show you what I did so that you can do it as well. The piece of designer series paper that I'm going to use is from the You're a Peach designer series paper collection. This paper will be retiring. For the folks who will be watching this video later, this is being recorded on April 27th of 22, just about 6 days. Yeah, 6 days before the new catalog will go live. It will go live next Tuesday. So this paper is going to be retiring, but you might want to think about grabbing it if you don't yet have it. And then also I'm using the Stitched Rectangles dies. I can't believe that they are still usable. I use these all the time, and it's amazing that I haven't worn them out, but I haven't. And I have grabbed 3 of those dies, and I'm going to show you the steps that I use to create this layered look by only using 1 piece of designer series paper. So the first thing that I did is I took my dies, and you're going to see that I've already die cut this, but pretend that I haven't. Let's just pretend that that piece of designer series paper is still intact. And what I simply did to start this process is I got 3 of the dies from the collection, and I took them out and I laid them on top of my piece of designer series paper. And I purposely want to have them kind of cattywampus. I'm not sure if that's a word, but I like the way it sounds, so I'm going to say cattywampus. And also, I wanted to make sure that they were overlapping. So if we look at the larger, or largest, excuse me, of the 3 dies, you can see that it overlaps the one that's going to be on the upper right, and it also overlaps the one that will be on the bottom right. I wanted to make sure too that I would cut some of the larger images so that when I stack things on top of each other, it's really evident that that design continues from the die piece to the background piece. And I just wanted to make sure that in here I have 3 layers. I've got the top die cut piece, the second die cut piece, and the background, and they all deal with that peach. So I'm just trying to find some places where there's some big images that are going to intersect. When I got happy with where I wanted the die cuts to go, I grabbed my phone and I took a picture of what I had done, because I am going to reference that as I go through and make my cuts. So this is the actual picture that I took, and it's just good to have because you are going to be dissecting and then putting this all back together. Now, one thing I want you to notice is the order that I stacked these dies. I put the smaller 2 underneath the big one. I did that intentionally. The first 2 dies that I'm going to cut are going to be the ones that are on the bottom. The reason for that is I want their entire image to show. So I want to be sure that I have that entire rectangle here and the entire rectangle at the top. And the only way that I'm going to get that is if I cut these pieces out first. So what I did is I left the 2 bottom dies where they were. I took the larger die off, and then I brought this over to my die cutting machine. And I did put a little bit of washi on each of those die cuts because I did want to make sure that I was not going to move those dies around when I die cut the shapes. So that's my first step. I would have put the piece through my die cutting machine. I would have these 2 dies in place, and then I'm going to get these pieces and I'll have those holes in my designer series paper. Very straightforward. This makes an awful lot of sense, I'm sure, to you guys as you're watching this. Obviously, you want to save these pieces because we're going to reconstruct the puzzle when we put it all back together. So now what I would do is I would get my phone and I would look at that picture that I have taken of how I place those dies, and I know where that larger die needs to go. So I'm going to take that larger die and I'm going to put it onto my designer series paper, and I'm going to see that, you know, I've overlapped these 2 pieces that I've cut out, and it may look a little odd, but I'm going to run this through my die cutting machine, and what I will get from that is a really kind of funky looking die piece, because obviously I didn't have a full area to die cut, but I wanted to get that shape die cut out. So what I'm left with, let me just take these away for a minute. What I'm left with is a really, really odd looking piece of designer series paper. But trust me, when we put it back together, it's going to look very similar to this with a lot of layers and just a really, I think, a really cool effect. And we're going to build this now together. I am literally going to start from the bottoms up. This is my card base. This is the piece of pumpkin pie cardstock. And again, that was cut to 4 1/8 by 5 3/8. And I definitely like liquid glue. So I am going to just put a little bit around the edges. I don't need to put a whole heck of a lot. And I am going to put that right onto the front of the card base and just try to get it as centered as I can. There should be a pretty equal frame all the way around. Well, you will see the basic white in the background. And that's going to be the beginning of my card. The next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to attach this piece of designer series paper to that cardstock. And before you do that, this may sound a little nuts, but make sure that you have your piece of designer series paper oriented the way you want to. So I know that my card's opening this way. I know that the designer series paper design is going this way. I can tell by looking at the peach at the bottom. And I'm going to go ahead and put that on to the card front. Now, one thing when you're doing this is you're going to have areas on this die cut piece of designer series paper that are going to have little jags, like here, little corner here. And you do want to try to get some adhesive in those little areas. You don't have to put a lot. When we adhere the die cuts that we have already prepared, we're going to be putting them on top of the little areas, those little triangles in this case that I cut when I cut out my dies. But I do want to try and get things adhered down. It will just make it a little bit easier. And I'm looking at this from the top. I'm going to start on the left-hand side. I'm just trying to get about as much border on the top and the bottom. And because I'm using that liquid adhesive, I can still move this around just a little bit. And then I'm just going to very gently turn that card over and give it a nice little burnish with my fingers to try to get that adhesive all the way around. Now again, at this point, this just looks a little strange, but trust me, it will be fabulous when we are done. So what we're trying to do is we're going to reconstruct, it's like a puzzle, but we're going to add a little element to it. We're not just going to put the pieces back in, we're going to put a background around each of those pieces to really highlight them, give them a little bit more character, and really draw the eye to each of those areas. So what I did, and what I would suggest you think about, is I cut a piece of cardstock for each one of my die cut pieces. And I did a couple things, and let me tell you what I did with those. The first is I chose some colors that I thought would work well with the designer series paper. This is Old Olive, and I think it works very nicely. There's a lot of foliage that is shown in this design, and the Old Olive definitely works well. These two pieces are Pumpkin Pie. And that was intentional because I really wanted to bring out the pumpkin pie color in that frame that we've already put down. Now, you can do anything. You could pick 3 completely different colors. You could go with one color. It's completely up to you. The second thing that I did is I cut each of the pieces of cardstock that I'm going to use to be just a little bit wider and a little bit taller than my die cut pieces. And I did that so there would be a little border right around the edge that would pop and make you pay attention when you look at the card. There are several ways to do this, and what I did is I simply got out a ruler and I measured about what the size of each of the die cut pieces was. And you don't have to be absolutely perfect. And I'm starting at a 1-inch line on this one, for example. So this one was about 1 inch long. And I knew that I wanted to have a little bit of a border, so I decided to make, and I'm going to move this over just so I can see it separately. I made the width on this one to be 1/8 of an inch bigger than my die cut. I did that on all three, and then I cut out the pieces of the color cardstock so that each would have that about 1/8 of an inch or so, wider and higher. Now this one was a little tricky because to measure this, we've got this funky outline. And I decided that I was going to take the easy way out to figure out what size of old olive I needed. So I got out the same die that I used to cut that designer series paper piece. And I just used a scrap piece. This is a piece of copy paper. And I just cut that out. And this was a lot easier to measure. And that allowed me to figure out what size I needed to cut in order to get 1/8 of an inch wider and 1/8 of an inch taller if I had cut this piece out completely. So not difficult, it just takes a couple of minutes to do. So what I'm going to do here is I'm simply going to put these pieces together. And this, just takes a couple of seconds here. Again, I'm using the liquid glue. I'm going to go around the edges. And on this one, since we're not dealing with a real rectangle, I'm going to make sure that I get into a little bit of those areas that are somewhat jagged. And I'm going to put this on so that I've got a nice border. And I'm just looking on the left, on the right, top and bottom, and trying to get it as centered as I can. And that's good enough. Then we'll do this one as well. Now I have experimented with other shapes, with circles, with some triangles, and what I find, for me, you may or may not find this when you make these kinds of cards, is I like to use dies that have straight edges for this particular kind of card. The reason is when you cut the frames, the pieces that I cut out of the colored cardstock that I'm gluing all of this to, you have a lot better chance to cut a piece that is going to be just a little bit wider and taller. If you have a circle and you try to do that freehand, or if you have a circle that you're using and you don't have a nesting die that is super close to the size of the die that you use to cut your designer series paper, you may find that the frame is a little too thick. That's what I found. So I would suggest when you're trying this and you're just kind of experimenting, look at dies that have a straight edge. And I recommend triangles, rectangles, squares, things like that. It's just a little bit easier. All right, we have our puzzle pieces together. So now we get to build this back up. Remember, when we did the die cutting of the designer series paper, the first two that we die cut were the smaller ones, the ones that we wanted to make sure we had the entire piece of the designer series paper to show. Well, to build it back up, we're going to build it in the exact opposite direction of what we did, or opposite order of what we did when we die cut. So that means the first one we're going to put down is the one that we die cut last. It's going to go in the back. That means this one. And what I'm going to do before I put it down is I'm going to dry fit it. I'm just going to put it on my piece. And what's really cool about this first piece is you have a cheat, because you can see where this is supposed to go. When the line is straight here, straight here, straight here, you know you have it where it needs to be. And what else should be lining up is you should be able to see that the leaf is lining up and the peach is lining up. And then that's where I want that piece to go. So I can see that I've got a complete blank and those rectangles are perfectly shaped. So now that I know where I need it to go, I'm going to put some adhesive on it. And I highly recommend that you do not get your glue really close to the edge when you're doing this, because you may be moving these pieces around just a tad to get everything aligned the way you want it to. And if you get your glue too close to the edge, you might get some glue where you don't want it to be. And I am standing up so I can see this, and I am focusing. When I'm putting this down, I'm focusing first over on where those empty spaces are, and I can see that that's a straight line. Then I'm coming down and I'm looking at the actual designs. So the peach, that leaf, I'm just trying to get things as lined up as I can, and I'm really not going to get too crazy because the brain is going to fill everything in anyway. And that looks pretty darn okay. So I'll give that a nice little burnish and we're good to go. Now, the next one, up to you, whichever one you want to do. I'm going to go ahead and put the one in the upper right in now. And again, when I put the glue on this, I'm going to concentrate a little bit more inside, and I'm building layers now. So I'm also going to put a little bit of glue in the middle of that piece that I'm going to attach. Now this one, I'm going to look at the paper, and I'm going to try and line up where the peach is coming together. Try to get things as aligned as I can and just see what it looks like. That's not too bad. And I think that looks pretty okay. So I'm going to press in the middle on that one to begin with, because I have put some adhesive right in the middle of that. So that's my second piece. And now I have my third, and I'm going to do the exact same thing. So I will put some glue toward the middle, not toward the edge, and definitely down the middle, because again, we're building layers on this. I've got the pumpkin pie here, I've got the old olive, and I want to make sure that I have some adhesive in the middle. And I am looking at that peach on the left. I'm looking at the peach down on the right. I'm also looking at this leaf. And because I'm using those stitched dies, I have some stitching on the bottom, so I can also try to scooch my pieces over. That's a technical word. So that I won't be able to see the stitching that is underneath. And then I'm going to go ahead and give that a nice little burnish. Isn't that cool? I mean, that's just cool. I'm sorry. I think it's cool. It's one of those that people will pause and say, oh my goodness, how in the world was that put together? Because it's very obvious. It's one piece, whether it's designer series paper or whether it's something that you stamped as a background, or both. It will work. So now I just want to show you how I finished off this card, and I will talk about some of the products that I used to do that. Since we are using the You're a Peach Designer Series paper, I thought I would bring in a few more things from the suite. One is the Sweet as a Peach stamp set, and I used the Let's Celebrate You stamp. Super cute. I stamped that onto a piece of old olive cardstock, and I used pumpkin pie in terms of the color. And then I wanted to have a little shape to use, one that would mirror the stitching that's on the rectangles, stitched rectangle dies. And I found one in the hydrangea dies. There's a really nice little piece. It's this one right here, and it has a really nice stitching. So I die cut that. And then I wanted to have some contrast in the background, a little bit more color. And I was searching for a die or just something to add a little bit more oomph in the background. And I was looking at the peach dies, which come with part of the suite. And there's this really fun die right here. But notice, if I put that die next to what I have on the finished card, not quite long enough. Well, who cares? What I did, and this is the other example, is I cut the die cut piece that I made from this particular die, cut it in half. And I just put that right behind the die cut that I made from the Sweet as a Peach stamp and the hydrangea die, and put that together. I did use some tape underneath. I put some adhesive on first, then some tape, and then I wanted to get a little bit more bling, and I decided that I would put a nice little bow on the top of my sentiment. And I love the Simply Elegant trim. This comes in both gold and silver, and it works incredibly well to tie a bow. So I tied a double bow. I used a little bit more Scotch tape to get one of the parts of the actual bow just adhered to the back, and then I have that coming over the top. 3 of the dimensionals in the background, and I'm going to go ahead and pop that onto the front of the card that we just made. And one trick that I love to use, I love a T-ruler. It's just a nice little tool to have because everything on this card so far is wonky. And I want to have, or cattywampus, that's what I was using before. I want to have this sentiment straight. So what I'm going to do is move my T-ruler up to about where I want that sentiment to be. And I'm just looking at the bottom of my die cut and where my ruler is, and I'm just going to put that straight down, and now I have my sentiment on there, and it should be pretty straight. Then I can trim off the little pieces of my bow, and then I wanted to add a couple of pretty gems, and I thought that these gems were just perfect. I thought they would add the kind of the right little color to the back and would pull in some of the colors in my design. These are the Elegant Faceted gems, and they are really gorgeous. They have clear, and then a pink, and then a frosted. And on this one, I wanted to draw the attention to the middle. I wanted to make sure people would actually see and look at the 3 areas, the 3 dies that were coming together. So I wanted to focus a little bit of my energy and bling kind of in the area where everything sort of comes together. I like to put bling when I have die cuts on the border, on the frame. I think it really makes people stop and pay attention, and it just adds a little interest. So I'm putting those 3 right there, and then I thought, oh, why not? Why not? Put a couple more cute little gems on the bottom, and again to draw the eye and the attention, to kind of put this one a little bit off on the side so it's hanging over. And oh, why not? We're going to put a couple more. So one more up at the top, and even add in another color up here, just so it really makes you kind of look around. So that's it. That is the way that I've been playing around with some fun triple layer, triple cutting dies with a twist. And obviously the twist is the cattywampus. I hope you enjoyed this. I hope you try it. And I also hope that if you try it, you will share what you do, because I would really love to see what you make. And in a few days, I will be back. I will be sharing another project that has similar bling to it, but it will be a completely different background, because that one will be stamped, and it will feature all of the new in colors that will be available next week. So until then, Inky hugs and happy stamping.